the Saints have been granted permission to meet with Derek Carr. Carr has permission to go talk to them. Now, everyone assumed this means Carr is going to be traded to the Saints. I did a little digging yesterday once we worked free of Radio Row, and I still think Carr's being cut. This is just an opportunity for Carr to get a head start on this free agency that begins next week, because unless he can talk to everybody out there, every team that may be interested, he's not going to agree to a trade. It's cut me or pay me, and they're going to cut him.
Right. Well, and I think, off of that, I would expect him to be cut as well. I understand that. And the compensation, of course, that adds, some extra levels to this conversation.
Whatever you give the Raiders by way of draft pick is less money than you would give to Derek Carr. If you can get him as a free agent, you'll pay him more than you would pay him if you had to give up a third-round pick. I saw a third-round pick floating around yesterday. It's going to be no-round pick. He's going to be cut.
Yeah, right. And we kind of know the teams that are going to be viable here, right?
Who do you think? Jets, Saints, who else? Panthers?
I don't feel like the Panthers and Frank Reich and Tepper are going to go for that, right?
Frank Reich's had enough
of the retread
quarterback tour.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think Tepper, I would think one of the reasons he got Frank Reich was like, hey, wait, you have an eye for quarterback, so I kind of got a guy here that maybe we can draft one and we can figure it out the right way, right? I don't expect that. We don't expect the Colts to go that way because they've been burnt by that. So, yes, I would think or suspect number one for the Jets would be Aaron Rodgers, but I could see Derek Carr there. And then after that, I think New Orleans is a team that I would think about. New Orleans has got some pieces on the offensive side of the ball and things where you go, well, they're still good. They could still be a high-functioning offense. I'm not sure it's ready to just go like total rebuild mode there. And we know the defense is damn good, too, especially the way they played at the end of the year. So I could see them maybe going, wait, we kind of still feel like we're in a little bit of a window here to get in the playoffs. We don't want to start with the rookie quarterback. Maybe we want to go with the Derek Carr type of thing.
What about elsewhere in the South, other than Carolina or New Orleans?
Houston.
What about Tampa Bay?
Or Tampa Bay. Sure. Tampa, I just feel like...
You don't want to follow Tommy?
I follow Tommy, and a little bit like, don't you get the sense that Tampa needs to just start over? I almost feel like it's...
But with what, Kyle Trask or draft somebody else?
Or draft somebody else.
Just a hard reset.
I think so. I think the lifeline of that team might be over to where it'd be a hard reset. And then the other team we talk about is Houston. Would Houston want to get into that conversation? Brother, he is a Texas kid. But I would think, again, they're a team that's going to be looking at a quarterback here for the future, too. So there's some things there that are certainly interesting. But New Orleans is one that's at the top of my mind.
I remember when he was drafted in 2014, there was just a very strong vibe that the Texans weren't going to go that route because he's David Carr's brother, and things ended so badly with David. You never know what David's saying to Derek. Now, when Derek is entering this phase of having multiple options and multiple teams at the table, if he plays this right, he can come out of it with a good deal. That's why this Saints thing, if it's just the Saints, that's not enough for him to work the angles and get the best possible outcome and feel comfortable.
Right.
You got to feel comfortable about it. You got to do your due diligence. The Raiders should have let him start this process as soon as the season ended. Let him start going around to the interested teams and hope that they could maybe work out a way to thread the needle and get somebody to trade for him for fear of him going somewhere else. But even then, he's still got the no trade clause. And he's got the hammer. And the hammer is cut me or pay me. That's what he needs to say. That's what he should have been saying, and I think that's what he's going to ultimately say next week.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's got all the power here for the most part. But here's one thing, Mike, that at least percolates in my brain a little bit. Do you think it's a given that one of these teams for sure is going to give him $40 million a year?
But if they were going to trade for him and take $40.4 million in full guarantees, if they're going to trade for him, you're going to get more on the market. If someone is going to pay you that much and give the Raiders what they want, you get yourself to an open competition. I mean, look at Deshaun Watson last year, and it's apples and oranges to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But Deshaun Watson sets up a trade with all that baggage, knowing he was going to be suspended.
Right.
And he still finagled it through his agent in a way that brought 4 teams to the table. They threw the Browns out at just the right time after they pissed off Baker Mayfield, and the Browns got desperate and swung back around. My point is, you can't even get those pieces in motion until you're free. And he has a 4-week head start on every other unrestricted free agent because he's cut, he's available. He can go to New Orleans, he can go to New York, he can go to Houston, he can go anywhere, and then they can set up the same kind of competition that the Texans and Deshaun Watson did last year, and that's the way you make it work. But then you figure out where you want to be.
Yeah.
You visit with all of them. You develop a gut feeling of who you want to play for, and I think that's what Derek Carr needs to have time to do, and that's the key. The Raiders haven't given him time to do it, so it makes it even more likely. He says, pay me or cut me. And I thought for a while maybe they were considering letting that money vest and then trying to trade him afterward. I don't think they're going to do that because I don't think Mark Davis wants to commit that money and run the risk of not having a trade partner, maybe having to pay a large chunk of that like we've seen other teams do.
Sure. I understand that too. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think I'm with you that I expected to be cut. I don't think it's a huge deal as far as we discuss all the time. I'm permission or not, like, we know that they were having conversations with the teams that are, and we know that. I mean, they didn't need permission, so
but you can't visit.
No, you can't visit.
If you want to visit,
difference.
that's the key.
That's the
You
difference.
can talk.
Right.
You can have hypothetical discussions. They don't, as long as you're discreet about it, you're not going to get in any trouble.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, once every 5 or 6 years, there's some random, vague tampering thing that nails someone. Last year with Miami, it was because Bruce Beal, the minority owner of the team, was being too open in his admissions that they were trying to get Tom Brady. If you keep your mouth shut about it, no one's going to know, no one's going to care, and the NFL's not going to give you a hard time. So we think he's going to be cut. It would happen next Tuesday. Because if he's on the roster as of 4:01 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, he's definitely on the roster the next day when the business day starts. His $40.4 million is fully guaranteed. So Tuesday's the day they got to say bye-bye Derek Carr.
How do you feel about Derek Carr, like if you're the Saints or the Jets, right? Like, it's very polarizing, Derek Carr. Again, he's a starting quarterback in football. He's, I think he's actually, his career's been okay, right? He's had some weird circumstances.
There's a reason the team that's had him for 8 years is moving on.
Well, and I would say it's really odd that a guy that for 8 years and all the amount of games he's played, and I think he's only won somewhere about 40% of his games and all that. In some ways, you do look at it sometimes and go, because I think more highly of him than maybe some people. I talk to some people in the NFL, and they're always like, "Oh man, Derek Carr. I mean, come on. I mean, Derek Carr. What are you going to do, right?" So he's kind of like even in the NFL with people I talk to, it's very polarizing when you bring up his name. Some are believers in him. Others think he's gotten a little bit of a free pass there. Gosh, he's only been to the playoffs once. He wins 40% of his games. Teams that have, for a quarterback that I think has made 150 starts, whatever, the resume is at the bottom of quarterbacks for that. So that's where I feel like this is going to be interesting to see who's really interested in him.
It's 9 years for Derek Carr, drafted in 2014. He has missed only, I'm doing the math here real quickly, he missed one game in 2016, one game in 2017. That was when he suffered the broken leg late in the regular season, missed the playoff game, the one time they got to the playoffs until 2021. He missed 2 games this past year because they told him to miss those games. You're out of here. He would have played all 17. So he's been durable. There's a lot of Kirk Cousins similarities here.
Well, there is. I think there is. That's where it's polarizing like that. You're right.
You're good enough to be good enough. Are you great? And the Raiders are moving on because they want great. So these other teams out there, it's almost like a fail-safe. It's almost like a stopgap. Like, we don't know who our quarterback's going to be, so let's just have this guy for a while until we figure out who our great quarterback is going to be, because we don't think he's going to be great here. Why would you think, in all fairness and with all due respect, and you can never say with all due respect and then do anything but insult the person afterward, but with all due respect to Derek Carr, why would anyone think that a guy who's had 9 years to be great with the Raiders is going to go somewhere else and be great right away? I think the Jets would be the best choice because they have such a great team already in place.
Sure. I think there's a lot of potential there. And again, we know Zach Wilson's not ready. He's not wanted by the fan base there. So I would think that, yes, they exhaust the conversation a little with Aaron Rodgers, and Derek Carr would be the second guy. The Saints are the one that I really look like you could be like to what you're talking about. Like, we're not sure he's the future, but he's good enough right now to where we can win, we can be in contention and be a pain in the butt in the NFC. We got Chris Olave and still a pretty good O-line and Alvin Kamara and that defense to where that seems to be the two spots that make the most sense to me.
And the Jets become a challenge, too, because, number one, the media market will not be kind. The fan base will not be kind. If there's any struggle whatsoever, it's going to be great the day he walks through the door and holds up the jersey. Everything after that is going to be downhill.
Scrutinized.
Any adversity, any 3 turnover games, any of the stuff that caused him to fall out of favor in Las Vegas, he is going to become persona non grata in New York, and that's just not going to go well. So if I was him, I wouldn't want the Jets. And then you've got all these Jets fans that are juiced up for Aaron Rodgers. You come off as the second choice.
Yes.
And that just makes the criticism even stronger if there's failure of any kind or struggle of any kind by Derek Carr. So I think you're right. I think the Saints make a lot of sense.
He's better than Danny Dalton. He's better than Jameis Winston, right? And I think there's, as far as the offense they're running down there, it's similar to Gruden's, so it won't be a huge adjustment. You can kind of hit the ground running that way as far as the West Coast terminology and all of that. So, yeah, that's the one I kind of seem to lean into the most.
And at least that Southern accent that he slips into from time to time will fit if he's in New Orleans. Maybe he'll slip into a Cajun accent from time to time.
You're such a jerk.
But he does. Yeah. I mean, should we just ignore it? He and Aaron Rodgers?
It's got to be in there. Like, see, he has more of an excuse to than Aaron Rodgers, right? Like, he actually is from Texas, so he might have actually talked like that a little bit at one point in his life. And then, you get around. Like, I lost my Jersey accent when I left Jersey for a long period of time, and people were always like, oh, you don't sound like you're from Jersey. But then when I get around my Jersey friends a little, then all of a sudden I'm like, hey, F you, get the hell out of here. Go to the mall. I'll call you later.
Thank you for restraining yourself, because we are live
I'm trying
on
to
Sky
be good.
Sports NFL. They can't bleep it out. Not that they ever do anyway. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.